Hey,
She has
Catie, how's it
water.
going?
We kiss.
Wait, who's kissing? No, we're not kissing, Catie.
I wanna go with you.
No. Katie. You have a fiance.
Not as close to your face.
No.
I want to.
Imagine Josh looking at an old photo of Catie and Ryan and suddenly realizing that the date underneath it makes absolutely no sense. The picture itself is not scandalous. Nobody is kissing. Nobody is hiding in a hotel room, and there is nothing that immediately proves Catie crossed a physical line. The problem is when that picture was taken, because according to everything Josh believed about their relationship, Ryan was supposed to be nothing more than a close friend who became important later. Yet this photograph suggests Ryan was already deeply involved in Catie's life during a period when Josh believed he was the person she was building her future around. That small date completely changes Josh's mood because he is no longer looking at Ryan as some annoying friend who occasionally gets too involved. He is suddenly wondering whether Ryan has been standing inside their relationship from the beginning, quietly hearing conversations, influencing decisions, and knowing things that Josh himself was never told. When Josh asks Catie about the picture, her first reaction makes everything worse because she does not immediately explain when it was taken or why Ryan was there. Instead, she wants to know where Josh found it, and that instantly creates a much bigger question than anything shown in the photograph. Josh notices the change immediately because there is a huge difference between someone saying, "That picture means nothing," and someone saying, "Where did you get that?" One response deals with the issue, while the other response deals with the evidence. Catie tells him he is making something out of nothing and insists she has never hidden the fact that Ryan has been in her life for a long time. Josh agrees that Ryan being around is not the issue, but the timeline still bothers him because Catie always made this friendship sound casual whenever Josh questioned how close they really were. That is when Josh starts doing something Catie clearly does not expect, because instead of arguing emotionally, he begins rebuilding the timeline from memory. He remembers certain arguments where Catie seemed strangely prepared for everything he was going to say. He remembers moments when Ryan appeared to understand Catie's frustration before Josh even knew she was frustrated. He remembers Ryan making comments that felt a little too informed for somebody standing outside the relationship. None of those moments seemed strong enough to become a major accusation by themselves, but placed together, they start looking very different. Josh begins wondering whether the problem was never that Ryan appeared too often, but that Ryan always seemed to arrive with information he should not have possessed. Catie would have an argument with Josh, and somehow Ryan already understood her side. Catie would complain that Josh was not listening to her, and Ryan would already seem prepared to defend her position. Josh originally dismissed that as Catie venting to a close friend, because people obviously talk to friends when relationships become difficult. What Josh cannot understand is why Ryan sometimes appeared to know about those problems before Josh even realized a problem existed. Then Josh finds the detail that turns a strange photograph into something much more difficult for Catie to explain. There is an old message connected to the same period, and Ryan tells Catie something that sounds harmless until Josh compares it with what Catie had been telling him at the time. Ryan writes that Catie already knows how he feels about what is happening between her and Josh. That sentence immediately bothers Josh because according to the timeline he remembers, Catie had not yet told him she was seriously questioning their relationship. That means Ryan was apparently discussing the future of Josh and Catie's relationship before Josh himself knew their future was being questioned. Suddenly, the issue is no longer whether Ryan was physically attracted to Catie or whether the two of them had ever crossed a romantic boundary. Josh is staring at something that feels much more personal because Ryan apparently had access to conversations about Josh's relationship that Josh himself was excluded from. He asks Catie how Ryan could have known that much if she had only been casually complaining to a friend. Catie immediately tells Josh that he is reading the message in the worst possible way because Ryan has always been someone she trusted when she needed perspective. She explains that talking to Ryan never meant she was choosing him over Josh, and she believes Josh is turning a normal friendship into something suspicious because he has never been completely comfortable with Ryan. That response almost works because Josh has clearly had issues with Ryan before, and Catie knows she can use that history to make the confrontation look like another round of jealousy. The problem is that Josh is no longer arguing about jealousy. He tells Catie that she can have male friends, she can have private conversations, and she can seek advice from whoever she trusts. What he wants explained is why Ryan apparently knew she was questioning their relationship before Catie ever told the man actually standing inside that relationship. That distinction matters because Catie keeps answering a different question. She keeps defending her right to have Ryan as a friend, while Josh keeps asking why Ryan had information that apparently belonged inside conversations between Catie and Josh. Josh finally asks her directly what she had been telling Ryan during that period, and for the first time Catie does not have a quick response. She says they talked about normal things, then says she sometimes discussed arguments, then admits Ryan probably heard more than Josh realized because she needed someone who would listen without immediately becoming defensive. Every answer sounds reasonable by itself, but Josh notices that the explanation is getting broader every time he pushes for specifics. At first, Ryan was simply a friend who knew occasional details, but now Ryan was somebody Catie regularly contacted whenever the relationship became difficult. That might still be completely innocent, but it creates a very uncomfortable emotional picture for Josh because he believed difficult conversations were happening between him and Catie. Now he is discovering that some of those conversations may have started somewhere else, with Ryan hearing Catie's real feelings before Josh received a filtered version later. Josh asks when those conversations started, and Catie suddenly becomes vague. She says she cannot remember exact dates because she has known Ryan for a long time and their conversations were never organized around Josh. Josh accepts that nobody remembers every date, but he points out that the message he is holding comes from a very specific period when Catie was telling him that they were still working toward the same future. If Ryan already knew she was questioning that future, Josh wants to understand what information he was missing. Catie tells him she was confused at the time and needed somewhere safe to process what she was feeling. That answer creates another layer because Josh realizes Catie may not have been lying when she told him she wanted the relationship to work. She may genuinely have wanted that while simultaneously expressing doubts to Ryan. The problem is not that people have doubts, because every serious relationship has them. The problem is that Ryan apparently became the person who received those doubts in their rawest form, while Josh received them only after Catie had already discussed them with somebody else. That is where Josh's anger begins changing into something much quieter and more painful. He tells Catie that if she had told Ryan about one argument, he could understand it. If she had asked Ryan for advice after a difficult night, he could understand that too. What he cannot understand is discovering that Ryan may have been watching the entire relationship develop from behind the curtain, hearing Catie question Josh while Josh was still completely unaware that those questions even existed. Catie responds that Josh is making Ryan sound like some secret partner when he was simply her closest friend. That phrase catches Josh immediately because he asks what closest actually meant during their relationship. Was Ryan simply the person Catie called occasionally, or was he the first person she called whenever something happened with Josh? Did Ryan hear about arguments afterward, or did Catie ask him what she should do before making decisions with Josh? Those are very different levels of involvement, and Catie suddenly looks far less comfortable answering. Josh then makes a request that Catie clearly does not want to hear because he tells her to call Ryan while they are sitting there. Catie refuses almost immediately and says dragging Ryan into another argument between them will only create more unnecessary drama. Josh looks at her and points out that if Ryan truly knows as much as these messages suggest, then he was dragged into their relationship a long time ago. Josh is simply asking for the first conversation where everyone involved is finally sitting in the same place. Catie says Ryan does not owe Josh an explanation, and Josh actually agrees with her. He says Ryan does not owe him anything, but Catie does, and if Ryan's version matches everything she has already said, then bringing him into the conversation should end the issue rather than make it worse. That puts Catie in a difficult position because continuing to refuse now looks more suspicious than simply making the call. She finally agrees, but then asks if they can do it later because Ryan might be busy. Josh notices that too, because he cannot understand why a conversation about completely innocent events requires preparation. Catie tells him he is being unreasonable and trying to turn her friend into a witness at some kind of trial. Josh says he is not looking for a confession because he does not even know what he is supposed to be accusing anyone of yet. He simply wants to understand why Ryan seems to know the history of their relationship better than he does. Eventually, Ryan joins the conversation, and the tension becomes uncomfortable almost immediately because Ryan is surprisingly calm while Catie looks increasingly nervous. Josh does not waste time accusing him of anything. He asks one simple question about how long Ryan has known Catie was unhappy with parts of her relationship with Josh. Ryan answers quickly and says he has known about their problems pretty much from the beginning. Catie immediately interrupts him, and Josh catches it before Ryan can say anything else. That phrase, "from the beginning," is much stronger than anything Catie admitted earlier because she made it sound like Ryan became a sounding board after problems started becoming serious. Ryan is now suggesting he knew about concerns almost from the earliest stages. Josh asks him what exactly the beginning means, and Ryan explains that Catie would sometimes call after disagreements, complain about differences between them, and question whether they were actually compatible long-term. Josh looks back at Catie because he has never heard the story described that way. According to Catie, she only spoke to Ryan when she occasionally needed advice. According to Ryan, these conversations were regular enough that he remembers the relationship being uncertain from very early on. Catie says Ryan is exaggerating because he is compressing months of conversations into one answer, but Josh can already see the problem. The two stories are not completely different, yet they are different enough to matter. Ryan tries calming things down by explaining that Catie never asked him to interfere. He says she was simply venting because she felt Josh did not always understand what she was trying to communicate. That explanation could have helped Catie, except Ryan then mentions a specific argument that Josh believed had remained completely private. Ryan references a night when Catie apparently felt trapped during a conversation about their future and left feeling like Josh had already decided what their life was supposed to look like. Josh's expression changes because he knows exactly which argument Ryan is describing. Nobody else was present, and Josh never knew Catie had repeated the details afterward. He asks Catie whether she told Ryan everything that happened that night. Catie says she was upset and needed somebody to talk to, but Josh is no longer focused on the fact that she talked. He is trying to understand how much of their private relationship was being transferred into Ryan's hands every time something went wrong. That is the moment where the triangle stops looking romantic and starts looking emotional, which might actually be harder for Josh to process. Physical betrayal would at least give him a clear line and a clear answer. Emotional loyalty is much messier because Catie can truthfully say she never crossed a physical boundary, while Josh can truthfully say he still feels replaced. The real question becomes whether Ryan was simply listening to Catie or whether he quietly became the person Catie trusted most whenever decisions about Josh had to be made. Josh asks Ryan whether Catie ever talked about ending the relationship completely. Ryan pauses before answering, and Catie immediately looks at him. That reaction tells Josh more than either of them probably intended because Catie suddenly seems less worried about Josh's question and more worried about Ryan's answer. Ryan says there were times when Catie questioned whether continuing made sense, but he insists that those conversations happened during emotional moments and should not automatically be treated like final decisions. Josh asks when those conversations happened, and Ryan gives an approximate period that causes another problem. According to his answer, Catie was questioning whether she wanted to continue before a major decision Josh believed they had made together. Josh remembers that period very clearly because Catie had appeared committed, hopeful, and completely involved in planning what came next. Now he is hearing that during the same period, she was privately telling Ryan that she might not even want the relationship. Catie tries explaining that both things can be true because she could love Josh while still having fears about their future. That is probably the strongest point she has made during the confrontation because uncertainty does not automatically mean deception. People can absolutely make plans while privately wondering whether those plans will work. Josh even acknowledges that, but he says the part hurting him is discovering that Ryan was apparently allowed to see the uncertainty while Josh was only shown the commitment. Ryan then makes the mistake that changes everything because he casually mentions something Catie had apparently said during one of those conversations. He explains that Catie told him she was not sure she had ever felt completely secure about choosing Josh, and Ryan assumed Josh already knew she had those doubts. Josh immediately says he has never heard that before. Catie turns toward Ryan and tells him that is not what she said, but Ryan insists he is not trying to create trouble and is simply answering the question honestly. Now, Josh is not even looking angry. He looks stunned because that statement rewrites several important moments in his memory. He asks Catie whether she ever told Ryan that she was unsure about choosing him before they made serious plans together. Catie says she might have used emotional language during a bad night, but she never meant that she had already decided against Josh. Again, her explanation could be true, yet every explanation now arrives only after Ryan reveals something Josh did not know. Josh tells Catie that he came into this conversation thinking Ryan might have been more than a friend in the obvious way, but that is no longer the part bothering him most. He says Ryan may never have kissed her, dated her, or crossed any physical boundary at all, yet somehow their relationship still seems to have existed inside conversations between Catie and Ryan before Josh was allowed to understand what was actually happening. That is a much harder accusation for Catie to dismiss, because Josh is not accusing her of cheating anymore. He is accusing her of giving another person access to the emotional center of their relationship while leaving him outside of it. Catie argues that Ryan was safe because he listened without judging, while Josh sometimes became defensive whenever she tried expressing complicated feelings. Josh admits that he probably did become defensive at times, but he asks how he was supposed to improve if Catie was giving the most honest version of her feelings to Ryan instead of giving it to him. Catie becomes emotional because she feels Josh is punishing her for having support outside their relationship. She says he is reducing years of friendship with Ryan into something dirty simply because Josh does not like how close they are. Josh tells her that friendship is still not the issue, and this time he gives her a very clear example. If Catie had told Josh, "I am struggling with us and I need Ryan's advice," then he might not have liked it, but at least he would have understood what was happening. Instead, Josh believes the pattern worked backward. Catie would question the relationship privately with Ryan, discuss what she wanted, process her frustrations, and eventually return to Josh after Ryan had already heard the unfiltered version. That means Ryan was not simply learning what happened. He was potentially present while Catie decided what those events meant. Whether Ryan intentionally influenced her or not, he occupied a position Josh never realized existed. Ryan pushes back on that idea because he does not want to be blamed for decisions Catie made herself. He tells Josh that he never told Catie to leave him and never tried to break them apart. In fact, there were times when he encouraged Catie to calm down and talk directly to Josh instead of making emotional decisions. That detail complicates the situation because Ryan does not behave like a secret rival trying to steal Catie. He behaves like someone who genuinely believes he has simply been supporting his friend. That actually makes Josh's problem more believable because there may be no villain in the obvious sense. Ryan may believe he did nothing wrong. Catie may believe she needed emotional support. Josh may still feel completely betrayed because the two people sitting across from him apparently shared an entire layer of his relationship that he did not know existed. Nobody needs to be secretly plotting for that situation to hurt. Josh then goes back to the original message because something about it still bothers him. Ryan had written that Catie already knew how he felt about what was happening between her and Josh, and Catie explained that as ordinary advice between friends. Josh scrolls farther back in the thread and tells them both that there is another message immediately before it. This is the part Catie apparently did not realize he had seen. The room changes before Josh even reads the message because Catie knows exactly what he's referring to. Josh explains that Catie had written something telling Ryan not to say anything yet because she needed to figure out what she was doing with Josh first. Suddenly, the argument is no longer about whether Ryan knew private details. Catie herself apparently acknowledged that Ryan possessed information she did not want discussed while she was still deciding what would happen with Josh. Josh asks the question he has been building toward from the beginning. What exactly was Ryan not supposed to say? Catie initially claims she does not remember the full context, which immediately frustrates Josh because this is now the third time her memory becomes unclear precisely when the timeline becomes uncomfortable. Ryan looks uncomfortable too, and Josh turns toward him because Ryan has been far more direct throughout the conversation. Catie tells Ryan not to answer for her, which only makes Josh more suspicious because he has not asked Ryan what Catie meant emotionally. He is asking what conversation happened immediately before the message. Ryan hesitates and finally says Catie had been discussing whether staying with Josh was actually what she wanted. She was not announcing that the relationship was over, but she was considering possibilities she had not yet discussed directly with Josh. That answer lands much harder than any accusation of flirting because Josh realizes Ryan was not simply hearing stories about fights after they happened. He was present while Catie was deciding whether the relationship itself should continue. Josh asks Catie how she can still describe Ryan as somebody standing outside their relationship when he apparently knew she was considering leaving before Josh knew leaving was even being considered. Catie says she needed time to understand her feelings before bringing something that serious to Josh. She did not want to threaten the relationship every time she felt confused, and Ryan gave her somewhere to speak freely without every emotional thought becoming a permanent statement. That explanation is understandable, and for a moment, even Josh appears to recognize the logic. Nobody wants every passing doubt treated like a breakup announcement. Then Josh points out the part Catie cannot easily answer. Processing emotions privately is one thing, but asking another person not to reveal those emotions because you are still deciding what to tell your partner is something different. The message suggests Catie knew there was information Ryan possessed that Josh did not, and she actively wanted that difference maintained until she decided what to do. That is where the entire confrontation changes, because Josh realizes he may never receive the dramatic confession he originally expected. Ryan might genuinely have been only a friend. There may never have been a secret kiss, hidden hotel room, private relationship, or physical affair. Yet the absence of those things does not erase what Josh has discovered because Ryan still appears to have been occupying an incredibly intimate position in Catie's life. Josh tells Catie that he does not know what label belongs on her connection with Ryan anymore, and maybe that label is not even the important part. What matters is that whenever Catie became uncertain about Josh, Ryan heard about it first. Whenever she questioned their future, Ryan helped her process it. Whenever she felt misunderstood, Ryan became the person who understood her. Josh was technically the partner, but Ryan may have been receiving the emotional honesty Josh believed came with that role. Catie insists that comparing those relationships is unfair because Ryan has known her differently and never carried the pressure that comes with being a romantic partner. Of course, it was easier to speak openly with Ryan because nothing was at stake between them. Josh responds that this is exactly why he feels uneasy. Ryan got the version of Catie that could speak without fear, while Josh got the version that had already decided how much information he was allowed to hear. Ryan tries removing himself from the confrontation because he can see that his presence is now making things worse. He says whatever happened between Josh and Catie belongs to them, and he does not want Josh blaming him for conversations Catie chose to have. Josh tells him he is not blaming Ryan for listening. He is trying to understand why Ryan became the keeper of information that directly affected Josh's life. Catie then accuses Josh of searching for betrayal because he cannot accept that she needed someone besides him. Josh says he did not go searching for betrayal. He noticed a date on an old picture, found a message that did not match the timeline he remembered, and asked questions. Every answer opened another part of the relationship he did not know existed. At no point did Catie volunteer the full story before Josh presented evidence that forced the conversation forward. That point is difficult for Catie because the pattern has become obvious. First, she said Ryan was simply a long-term friend. Then she admitted she discussed arguments with him. Then Ryan revealed those conversations started much earlier than Josh realized. Then Ryan revealed Catie had questioned whether she was fully committed. Finally, the message showed Catie specifically asking Ryan to keep something quiet while she decided what to do about Josh. None of those details proves a secret romance, but together they create a serious credibility problem because Josh no longer knows where the boundaries actually were. Every time he thought he understood Ryan's role, another detail expanded it. That is why Josh stops asking whether something physical happened and asks Catie a question she clearly was not expecting. Was he ever the person she trusted most while they were together? Catie does not answer immediately because there is no safe response. If she says yes, Josh can point to everything Ryan knew before him. If she says no, she is admitting that the emotional hierarchy inside their relationship was completely different from what Josh believed. She finally says love and trust are not competitions, and that she trusted Josh differently from the way she trusted Ryan. Josh understands the distinction, but it does not comfort him. He says he thought becoming Catie's partner meant he would eventually become the person who heard the difficult truth, not only the version she was ready to present after discussing everything somewhere else. He never expected Catie to stop having friends, but he did expect major doubts about their future to eventually reach him before those doubts became a long-running discussion with Ryan. Catie says she was afraid of how Josh would react, and that may be the first explanation that actually gets through to him. Josh becomes quieter because he recognizes there may have been moments when his own defensiveness made honesty harder. That does not erase the secrecy, but it changes the emotional balance. Instead of a simple story where one person deceived another, the situation becomes about how two people gradually stopped feeling safe enough to tell each other the truth. Ryan may have filled that gap because Catie needed somewhere to speak without consequences. Josh may have resented Ryan because he sensed that gap without understanding what it contained. Catie may have defended Ryan more aggressively because questioning that friendship felt like questioning the only place where she could speak freely. Once those pieces come together, earlier arguments suddenly become much easier to understand. Josh finally tells Catie that the hardest part is not discovering she had doubts. He probably had doubts too. The hardest part is realizing there was an entire history of those doubts being discussed with Ryan while Josh kept believing that whatever happened between him and Catie stayed mostly between them. He feels like he has been introduced to a second version of his own relationship, and Ryan somehow had access to that version before he did. Catie asks what Josh actually wants from her now because she cannot undo conversations that happened months ago. Josh says he wants one honest answer without another explanation changing it later. He asks whether Ryan ever knew something important about their relationship that Catie deliberately chose not to tell Josh at the time. That question finally removes every distraction because it does not ask about romance, jealousy, friendship, or physical boundaries. Catie admits there were probably things Ryan knew first because she needed time before discussing them with Josh. It is not the explosive confession Josh originally feared, but somehow it hits harder because it confirms the emotional pattern he has been trying to understand. Ryan was not necessarily replacing Josh romantically, but he was repeatedly receiving information Josh believed should have eventually come directly to him. Josh looks at Ryan and says he no longer thinks Ryan is the central problem. Ryan was available, Catie trusted him, and Ryan listened. The real problem is that Josh and Catie were apparently living inside two different versions of the same relationship. Josh believed problems existed once they discussed them together, while Catie had sometimes been living with those problems long before Josh even knew they had begun. That difference explains why Catie occasionally seemed emotionally farther ahead during their arguments. She may have already spent days talking through the issue with Ryan before Josh heard about it. By the time Josh started processing what was happening, Catie may have already examined every possibility, defended her feelings, questioned the relationship, and decided what she wanted from the conversation. Josh was starting at the beginning while Catie was already somewhere near the end. Suddenly, several strange moments stopped looking strange. Ryan's confidence when talking about Josh makes more sense because he had apparently heard far more context than Josh understood. Catie's tendency to defend Ryan also makes more sense because Ryan was not merely another friend in the background. He had become part of the emotional system Catie used whenever her relationship became unstable. That still does not automatically make the friendship inappropriate, but it explains why Josh could never shake the feeling that another person was standing between them. He may have been sensing a real imbalance without understanding its shape. He thought he was competing with Ryan for Catie's romantic attention, when the deeper competition may have been over who received her complete honesty. That is a much more uncomfortable problem because physical boundaries are easy to describe. Emotional boundaries are different for every couple. One person can believe confiding deeply in a friend is completely normal, while another person can feel betrayed if that friend knows intimate relationship details that the partner himself does not know. Neither feeling disappears simply because nobody cheated. Catie tells Josh she never intended to humiliate him or make him feel like an outsider. She says Ryan was simply the person she could speak to when she was overwhelmed, and sometimes she needed those conversations before she could understand what she actually wanted to say to Josh. Josh believes at least part of that explanation, but he cannot ignore how much information Ryan accumulated during that process. The conversation ends in a place neither of them expected. Josh does not uncover a secret relationship, and Catie does not produce one perfect explanation that makes everything disappear. Instead, Josh discovers something more complicated. Ryan may have remained just a friend, while still becoming one of the most emotionally important people inside Catie's relationship with Josh. That leaves Josh with a final question that is much harder than asking whether somebody cheated. If Catie was repeatedly telling Ryan what she could not tell Josh, asking Ryan to stay quiet while she decided what to do, and discussing the future of the relationship before Josh knew that future was uncertain, then when did Ryan stop being simply Catie's friend and start becoming part of the relationship itself? Josh thought he was looking for evidence that Ryan secretly meant something romantic to Catie, but the evidence leads him somewhere completely different. Ryan may never have been her boyfriend, and that may not even matter anymore. What Josh discovers is that Ryan had access to fears, doubts, arguments, and decisions that Josh believed belonged inside his own relationship. That is why the final message hurts more than the photograph ever could. The photograph only showed Ryan standing beside Catie. The message showed where Ryan may actually have been standing emotionally because he knew Catie was questioning Josh, knew she had not told Josh everything, and apparently understood that some of those conversations were supposed to remain private until Catie decided what happened next. Josh can forgive Catie for needing advice, and he might even understand why Ryan became the person she trusted during difficult moments. What he cannot easily forgive is realizing that while he believed he was building a future with Catie in real time, Ryan may have already been hearing Catie privately debate whether that future should exist at all. And that leaves the one question Catie cannot answer with a simple defense. If Ryan really was only her best friend, why did he know the truth about her relationship before the man actually inside it did? This story is fictional and created for entertainment.